All right. Yeah, so we'll kind of get right into it. My name's Garrett. I think a few of you here, a lot of familiar faces, not just because I spoke at the club, I think earlier this year about stillwater fishing, but I think I also spoke, you probably also know me from shows, but we'll get kind of into that. So the topic tonight is going to be Pacific Northwest jetties. We got a lot of them here, and they are underfished and full of fish. So we'll kind of get into how to tackle those, and how to do it and do it safely and do it well and have awesome fishing. So we'll get right into it. Let's go. So a little bit about me. I got a lot of experience. I've been doing this for about 15 plus years now. Um, I've been in a few magazine articles. I've had some written about me. I've written some other ones, so you might have seen something that I've written or been written about me. I've been a guest on a lot of podcasts. So if anyone in here is a podcast listener, specifically fly fishing shows, I've been on I think five now, sometimes multiple appearances. So it gives you kind of an idea where you might have heard me as well. Also at a lot of shows. So chiefly the Albany show. I'm always there, but I've been at other ones. The last one I was at the Southern Oregon Fly Tying and Fly Fishing Fair. That was a month ago. I was also Fly Tyer of the Year this year from Oregon FFI. So that was a big. Oh, thank you. So a little bit of that, and then I do some work with some companies like Uphaven and Nature Spirit and Spirit Vices. So been kind of around a little bit, but we'll kind of get into the jetty. So we'll talk about kind of where to go. Where is the jetty? What is a jetty kind of thing? So jetties are pretty common along the Oregon coast. They're common along all coasts. They have them in California, they have them in Washington, but Oregon specifically, our topography really lends itself to jetties. Jetties are required, well, not necessarily required, but they're extremely helpful for commerce out of estuary areas. What happens is the way our coast is set up, the sand slowly gets pushed north, south to north, and over time, without a jetty, the sand would cover the opening of the bay, and it would require a storm or some other act of God to open up that bay again to allow water to come out and ships to come out. So what we've done as humans is we've put up jetties, just big long piles of rock that extend out into the ocean, and that allows us to have a barrier so the sand doesn't cover the access. Every about 10 years or so, they still have to dredge the jetty. They still have to take care of that process and get all that sand out, but it allows them to only do it every 10 years instead of every year or months at a time. So we just have a lot of rivers that empty into the ocean, and we all know a lot of them. Um, but yeah, so we have jetties basically throughout. There's some places that have natural rock structures that kind of defend the port. A great example of that is Depot Bay. Depot Bay doesn't have a jetty, doesn't need it. It's all rock around there. It's too deep of water right off the coast there, so the sand kind of gets pulled away and out. So no need for a jetty. But places like Tillamook, Newport, Lincoln City doesn't have a jetty, for example. They just don't need it the way the estuary is set up. But there's other places, Astoria, for example, big jetty across the Columbia. So yeah, they're just kind of there. And just like the man made structures, for example, outside of Dubai, where they have like the Palm and the World Islands out there, they are ecologically not supposed to be there, but they're incredible fish habitat. So we'll kind of get into that. Um, I kind of talked about where they are and what they are. They're all over the place. Don't feel like you have to hunt far. The closest one for all of us here is going to be Newport. It's probably so for me, I live in Lebanon, so it's about an hour and 15 minutes. It's probably an hour and 30 minutes from you guys to get to Newport. The times I go, it's probably a little bit quicker because there's no traffic, but that kind of gives you an idea of where we can go and target this kind of stuff. So when you're on the jetty, there's a lot of things to look for. This is from GPS Nautical Charts. You can get it as an app. It's a paid app on your phone if you want. It's like $20 a year to have it. So I got it for 1 year and took a bunch of screenshots, so I had them on my phone. But you can always go online and go to a desktop. It's pretty hard to bring out a computer or a laptop out on the jetty or out on the lake or something like that. So sometimes it's nice to just take screenshots and put them on your phone. That's what I do. But this kind of gives you an idea of what we're what a jetty kind of looks like. And so every jetty is going to have every bar, every estuary is going to have a deep and a shallow side of that jetty. It's really hard or really cost prohibitive for them to dredge the entire width of that. It's probably, oh gosh, I'm totally estimating half a mile across. It's pretty far to get across that area. So to dredge all that would be a lot of work. So they typically pick one side, the north or the south side, to make that the deep side. And so in the case of Newport, this is Newport's jetty right here, Yaquina Bay's channel right there. The deep side, the steep side is going to be the south jetty. It's also the most accessible, so that's really nice too. But for example, if we go up to Barview, which is Tillamook's jetty, the north jetty is the steep one. If we go all the way up to the Columbia River, it doesn't matter which jetty you're on because it's 5, 6 miles across. They're equally as deep. Wherever you have a fishing license is probably where you want to go up there. But there's all over the place. You just got to look on one of these maps or just kind of know from experience. I've gone and fished the North Jetty. It's terrible. It's 5 feet for about 200 feet, and then it starts to drop off. And if anyone here can cast 300 feet, kudos. Maybe Beth can. She's part of the casting club, but we really can't do that. So the South Jetty is where we tend to be. But things we're going to look for is going to be things like drop offs, like I mentioned, fingers. The Yaquina Bay Jetty, the South Jetty in Newport, is kind of famous for that. The fingers are these mini jetties that kind of extend off the main one in towards the bay. These are designed to help stop breakers and bigger waves and swells kind of coming in. And they're all myriad out of lengths. But if someone says, I'm going to go fish the fingers over at on the South Jetty, that's what they're talking about, these little miniature jetties. They do get completely submerged at high tide, so I would recommend staying off of them. Unless you're really good with timers and watches and you know the tide charts really well. Every year, I've heard about it less recently. Maybe it's just because I'm not as plugged in. But usually every year someone gets stranded out there. They go out there on low tide, they fish, they're having a great time, and then they go, well, I'm done, and they turn around and they're on an island. And they go, well, don't want to swim, I don't know what to do, and they're just kind of stuck. And so either a boat has to come pick them up or they have to take a swim. So those are kind of things to keep out for. But this is a good example from that topographical map. You can kind of see one of the fingers that sticks out there. It goes out further than what you see right there, probably another 100 feet. But that's what shows up on the maps, for example, when they took these readings. But you're going to be looking for the shipping lanes, like I said, the deep side. You're going to be looking for bait, a lot of anchovies. We have a lot of Pacific anchovies that kind of move in and out of these estuaries and bays. We also have a lot of herring. Those are going to be your two main forage fish. But they have sand lances, there's shrimp, there's krill, there's crab spawn, there's jack salmonids, so sea run cutthroats, salmon, steelhead, things like that. So there's a lot of things moving there, but the things where you see actual bait flashing in the water, that's going to be things like anchovies or herring, and they get big runs and pushes of that. So this is just another point of view. I've turned it so we're not truly north, but that kind of gives you an idea of what we're expecting. Right by the rocks, you're looking at 3 feet, but then quickly, 50 more feet out, you're 17 feet deep. And so that's what we want. We want to get right on the edge of the rock and sand right out there. So more of it. This is from a recent Google Maps thing. You can kind of just barely see those fingers kind of under the surface. They take new pictures all the time. So when I took this picture and used it in here, they're mostly submerged, but I've seen older ones where they're totally exposed. So tides are tides, they change. But that gives you an idea how hidden they can be. And if you walk all the way out on them and then the tide flips, you can see why that could be a bit of a problem. So we'll talk about some weather and tides. These are things that I would pay attention to if I was going to go fishing. So I say weather impacts fishing as far as casting and safety. It doesn't put the fish down. The fish don't care. They live in the ocean. The ocean's a big place. It's a rough place. The fish don't care that it sprinkles on them every once in a while. They're from Oregon too. They get the rain. They understand it. But it is a big concern for you guys out here. So one of the things is it's really hard to cast in a north wind blowing at you at 25 miles an hour. I don't care how good you are. It's really tough. And even if you can do it, it's really laborious. And so it doesn't make you want to fish very long if it's too much. So think about that. The other thing is safety. I will say it multiple times. So I'll start now. It is always slippery. It's always sharp. Everything out there. If you're curious, is it sharp? It's sharp. If it's slippery, it's definitely slippery. I've stepped on totally bare rock out there and the rock wobbles, or the rock is like stepping on a sheet of glass. You can't get any grip on that thing. So, and it can be bluebird skies, sunny, 70 degrees, beautiful day at the coast. Just keep that in mind. That's usually when it gets you, not when you're thinking about it. And then every rock out there is sharp in some capacity, or it has a sharp thing living on it. So just keep that in mind when you're out there. It's not for the faint of heart. I know fly fishing tends to skew towards a more older demographic. So if you're not good at rivers, you're going to be really bad at the jetty. I don't want to discourage people from going out there because it's a lot of fun, but just know your limits, know what you're willing to do, go with somebody, wear the proper safety equipment, and we'll talk about that as well. But my limit is 25-mile-an-hour gusts, 15-mile-an-hour sustained wind, and I'm kind of watching for the birds. So if the birds are basically looking like they're floating in midair and not moving forward or back, that's not a good sign for your casting. So I would recommend waiting it out. I've done that plenty of times where I've driven out there ready to go. I got all my stuff ready. I get out of the car and feel like I need to wear welding equipment because of the sand hitting me in the face. It's so intense. I go, okay, I guess I'll just hang out. And then you hang out for a little bit, the white caps come down, and then you can start fishing. So that kind of gives you an idea. It's not that big of a deal. Just kind of waiting it out. again, like everyone says, wait 5 minutes, the weather's going to change. So, tides impact fishing less than I originally thought. I put that up there kind of in a way to kind of help you as anglers out there not to be so hyper focused. One of the things we do, and I think it's because of being a fly fisherman, we want tons of information, right? We want to know exactly what the right place, right time, right thing to do. And so then if it's not perfect, we don't go. I'm sure I bet everyone in here would raise their hand if I asked you, have you ever canceled a trip because of conditions? And everyone's raised their hand, including myself. Um, but the tides really don't affect it. The last time I went and I got there and I looked at my phone and went, oh, I read the tides wrong because I thought it was going to be my quote unquote perfect time. And we'll talk about that as well. And I was like, this is going to be terrible. I'm not going to catch any fish. And I didn't really catch any fish until I started to catch fish and I caught a bunch. And so at the very end, I have a video from that night and about the first fish I caught. It's really a fun little video, but it kind of shows you uh, just go. It's fishing. The worst case scenario is you're outside in nature, usually alone. There's no one out there, so it's really quite nice. But I do find that slack tides are the best. When there's no tide ripping the fish around, they tend to be much more happy and willing to come out and chase things and eat things. And then I personally like the low tidal change. I like to fish from slack low all the way through high. And the reason behind that is you have current pushing water out. So if you go from low to high, you have tidal current plus river current ripping your flies out to the ocean. And sometimes your flies just can't get deep enough fast enough. If you use really heavy sinking lines and tungsten flies and multiple flies on your rig, you can probably get around that. But again, it's a lot of work. But if you like swinging flies, it's a great way to swing flies. And you can catch a fish that might break an 8 weight. So it's fun to kind of have those experiences. But I prefer low to high because then you have tidal currents pushing in and river currents pushing out, and you get more of that. My feeling, more of a slack environment for longer. So that's just kind of my feeling on the whole thing. And then I say rain plays a factor in delay. There's certain bays and estuaries that are worse. There's no jetties, there's no natural rocks in Lincoln City, but Lincoln City is probably one of the worst contributors to this. The rain that we're having now, we've been having rain so much it doesn't really matter. But let's say we had rain on Tuesday, it probably wouldn't affect the, Lincoln City's estuary until Thursday, and then it would last probably till Saturday. This fresh water just kind of lingers in that area. People who crab a lot will know that. The crabs don't like it when it rains because it makes it too fresh and not salt enough. And so the fish don't like it either. They'll tend to move out more. But it kind of works on a delay. So if the rain is today and you're going today, still go, just be safe. But it's not going to affect the fishing that much. Now, if you were going to go to the next day or the day after, you might have to think about that. And then mostly for comfort. And then the last big thing, this is the thing that blows people's minds, is the night. These fish are extremely nocturnal. When you see some more pictures of them, you'll see their eyes are humongous. They eat with their eyes and they are looking for stuff all the time. And they have a much higher advantage over an anchovy. Their eyes are bigger. They're bigger. They come out at night to hunt those things. And so I have been touch and go on daytime success. Nighttime, it's almost impossible not to catch fish if you're out there. So night is the time to go. Plus, it's one of the only two places you can fish at night in Oregon. The only other place is Miller Lake. And if you hate your suspension, go to Miller Lake. You'll have a great time. Those here who know, the road to Miller Lake is rough. But you can fish that at night and catch big browns. It's fun. It's great to do that. But the entire ocean off the Oregon coast is open at night for fishing. So take advantage of it. We don't get to do that here. Some states allow it where you can go fish, mice for brown trout in the rivers or lakes or stuff like that. We don't get that opportunity here in Oregon, so I like to take advantage of it. Plus, it's a great way to you get off. I still work. I'm sure a lot of you here are retired, but when I get off work, I can get off work on a Friday. I can fish until midnight, get home late, 1 o'clock in the morning, sleep until 9, and I have a whole weekend to go do things with friends or family or anyone else, and still have a full weekend to do those things. I could still, when I was younger, I could still go mow the lawn for my parents. I could still get the car washed, still do all those things, and got a day of fishing in to boot. So it's kind of a nice little thing. And then you get fish in the end. You get some fish tacos. So it's a win-win-win all around, in my opinion. So time of year, it is year round. You could go right now. I would not, just because I don't know. I don't like to be soaked all the way down to my underwear. I like to stay dry for the most part. So you can go year round, but peak time for me is March through September. The really, really peak time, I love going in May and June, and I love going in September. Those are kind of my two favorite times. But I'll be there a lot in August. I'll be there towards the end of July. When the rivers heat up, the ocean's still cool. So it's a great heat wave fishery. When they start putting hoot owl restrictions on our rivers or the lakes start getting too warm, going to the jetty is a great place so you can still get that fly fishing fix and not be as impactful on the local native fish population. So lingcod are interesting. They spawn just like trout or salmon or steelhead. They create a redd and they lay eggs and they fertilize them and do all those things. So their spawn is February, May, and they come in shallow for that. So if you're really wanting a lingcod, come in the early spring. That's when they're going to be moving in shallow. Lingcod will beat you up. I've had lingcod break fly lines before. So not the leader, not the tippet, your fly line. So they're mean fish, but they're really, really, really fun. So that's kind of what I like to time. The other thing is bait movement. Bait really starts kicking up end of June, beginning of July, and all the way through the rest of the summer. It is so when bait's moving, fish are happy. I should really know this, and I don't because it's one of those things where so rockfish, like the one you see there in the picture, they're either viparous or oviparous. If anyone wants to correct me, feel free. But I believe oviparous is what they are, which means that they give birth to live young. They keep eggs inside. The females hold the eggs inside. They're internally fertilized and they give birth to the live young. And they do that twice a year. So they're not putting redds. They're just eating and living the whole time. Unlike a salmon, a steelhead, a trout, a lingcod, they're constantly producing young and they don't have to put a redd down. They don't have to put a bed. They just living their lives. So very different kind of fish. So you don't have to worry about spawning season for them. As I said, May might be the best time of year, and as I said, perfect heat wave fishery. It's really, really, really good for that because it's also cool on the coast. It can be 100 degrees in the valley, and it'll be 65, 70 on the coast. It's really nice. So how to approach the jetty? So this was a picture from the last time I went. You can see the bridge right there in the background, and you can see the North Jetty, and then Uquinna Head lighthouse right up there. Not the Uquinna Head, the Bay Lighthouse up there. So it's a great picture I got there. So I'll pull out the pointer now because I'm going to kind of talk about some stuff here. But this is a great Google. I got it. I think I got it. Perfect. So this is just a picture aerial view of it. So these are the fingers that you see here. I'll kind of point them out. You got the short one. It looks like it has a bridge piling on the top. You have the longest one, which is the next one, and then these two other shorter ones. And you can see this is the main jetty way through here. These are the vault toilets. So I do fish alongs out there every summer where I'm part of a Facebook group called Oregon Saltwater Fly Fishing. It's a private group, so you got to join. We got to accept you into it, but join it, be accepted into it. And then we do fish alongs where we all meet up right here in this little parking area that we have, and then we all head out and fish and find places to fish. So if you're new to it, you've never done it, you want to fish with somebody, come out and do that with us. But this kind of gives you an idea of the lay of the land. Once you get up here, this is where you can't take your car any further, and you have to head west out to the jetty. That's where everyone thinks you go. Everyone thinks when I say we go jetty fishing, we go to the very tip of the jetty, and we look like a National Geographic picture. We got waves crashing over the top of us. To give you an idea, I fish a lot right here, which means I can unlock and lock my car that's parked right here. I am within a really good long back cast of my car. So don't feel like you have to go out on your expedition out to the end. It's not necessary. Mitch, the owner of Two Rivers Fly Shop, when he goes out, he parks his car here and fishes here, to just give you an idea. And I'm not giving away any secret spots. There's nothing that's in particularly secret. It's the jetty. You just have to find the fish, and we'll kind of talk about that here. So this is a zoomed in on kind of two of those fingers there. So you can see these are just different points that you would fish, and as you can see, I have different lines coming out. This is how I'd fan cast and search for fish. So I'd probably start my day where the purple is, and then if I didn't catch fish right away, 15, 20 minutes, hop to the green spot, 15, 20 minutes, hop to the blue, and so on and so forth. The reason why is that the jetty is covered in fish, and you can probably catch a fish at every one of those spots, but there's schools of fish. And so I want to find a school, because when you find a school, you can have unbelievable numbers that if I told you probably wouldn't believe kind of thing. I went out with a buddy, and between him and I, we probably landed 300 fish. Because we got into a school of them, and if the school is 300, 500, 1,000 fish large, and they're hungry, they're just going to keep on biting. For 2 hours, every single time our flies touched the water, we had a fish on, a grab, a follow, some sign of life every single time we casted. And we probably casted from me to Beth. That's as far as we went. And we just kept slamming fish for 2 hours straight. It was unbelievable. You know how you get bass thumb? Our thumbs barely had skin left on them. They were just shredded by the end of the night. So it's really, really great when you run into them, but you kind of have to find them. You do have another option. You could just sit and wait. I could sit at this blue spot and just wait. But it's not very fun. It's very demoralizing to stand in one spot for hours and hours and hours and not hook a fish, not see a fish, not even think there's a fish around kind of thing. So it's worth moving around, but the rocks aren't easy to move on. I fished Barview for the first time this year, this summer. I went up with a group, part of our fish along group. Some people from Portland wanted to come. And I don't care for Barview very much for a few reasons. One, you have to pay to park there. So I'd rather go to the South Jetty in Newport because it's free. The other reason is the rocks that they use there to create the jetty are humongous, the size of Volkswagens. They are big rocks, and so they're really hard to kind of maneuver around. The South Jetty in Newport, they're closer to the size of, maybe the small chest freezer over there or one of these chairs. They're pretty small rocks, so they're easy to, when I say easy to maneuver, they're easier to maneuver. So I kind of prefer it for that, but that's kind of something to think about. If you're going somewhere that has a big giant jetty with giant big rocks, which are going to last a lot longer and probably cheaper for them to place in the long run, it just means it's going to be harder for you to kind of be out there. But it does mean you're going to have flatter areas to fish, easier places to kind of camp up. So kind of take that in mind. But you want to be looking for fish when you're out there. Find the school, find where they're at, kind of hunt around. It's really nice when we have a group. So our biggest fish along this year is we had 7 anglers out there. And it was really great because one guy at the end started catching fish and we all kind of started scooching our way down to him. And then we all started catching fish. So there's so much room. If all of you came out there and we all brought 10 of our best friends to come out there and fish with us, we would still have so much room we wouldn't know what to do with it. So there's so much room on the jetty. So don't ever feel like it's crowded. I've been out there and felt very crowded, but that's because I was the only guy catching fish and every gear guy and his mom wanted to come out and catch fish with me. So just keep that in mind when you're out there. There's usually, generally speaking, lots and lots and lots of room. So we'll talk about some of the tackle, some of the things to bring out there because you can't bring your 9'5" weight. As much as everyone wants to use their 9'5" weight for every type of fishing that you do, this is one of those things you can use it, but you're probably only going to be able to use it one time because the fish are just going to snap it like a toothpick. It'll blow your mind. So my go-to rod is an 8 weight. I've gone out there with 7s and I've gone out there with 6s. The first time I did well out there was on a 7 weight, and I felt severely undergunned. I thought I was going to break it on 1 pound fish. These things pull. There's something in saltwater that changes a fish. People know that from steelhead. People know that from salmon. When they get into that saltwater, they just get supercharged, and these fish are no exception. They're covered in spines, they're covered in fins, and you are fighting them over their home and pulling them into their home. So it is not a let them run kind of game. We don't want to pull drag. I'm not putting any of these fish ever on the reel. I want to pull these fish hard. So I got to fish heavy lines to cast heavy flies, and I want a rod that I can lift somewhat. Fly rods aren't great at lifting, but 8 weights are much better at lifting than, let's say, a 5 weight. So I use a salt safe rod. The rod of choice that I have used for a long time is the Echo Boost Blue. That's what I've used. I just got the Echo EPR, which is their premium, their top of the line big game rod. You want a decent rod. You can get out there with anything, but an 8 weight would probably be my minimum for most casters. If you have a 7, you can probably get away with it. If you have a 9, it might be a little bit too heavy for fatigue. But if you're going after lingcod, I would probably bring a 9. That kind of gives you an idea where to kind of start. Reels, they need to be robust, but not necessarily sealed, meaning that they don't have to be saltwater safe. You don't need to spend the $500 on the fanciest Able or Hatch reel out there or the top of the line lamps and light speeds. You don't need that. If you're a reel junkie, I'm sure there's a couple people in here that love a reel. They treat them like watches. They're almost like jewelry at that point. They're really, really nice. But I use a Reddington Behemoth. You can see it right there. I use a black one. That means I can beat it up. I can tear it apart. If it breaks, if I slip and fall on the rocks and I crack it or bend the spool or something like that, I'm not losing out on a $500 reel. It's $130. They're really, really affordable. And if you take care of it, which you have to take care of a saltwater reel, saltwater reels don't mean maintenance proof. They just mean they're supposed to be used for the saltwater. They're sealed systems. But you still should take care of it. Every time I get back from fishing, as much as my girlfriend hates when she just wants to go to bed when we get back home at 1 o'clock in the morning, I go to my sink and I rinse it out and take my reel apart, pull off line, hose it out with a sprayer in the sink, and put it on the dish rack to dry for at least overnight or longer. Because I want to get all that salt off of it. Salt's an abrasive. I want the sand off of it. I don't want salt water on the housing at all. And then usually once a year, I'll lube it up if I need to. If I feel like it's getting kind of sticky, I'll put some real lube on there. But otherwise, that's all I do. I've had the same reel for like 5 years. As long as you take care of it, it will take care of you. It's just like anything else you own and use in the fly fishing or in life. So just keep that in mind. Line, My favorite line specifically is the Scientific Angler triple density, and I always thought it was 135. I've been since informed it's I-35, which I feel like anyone would have been fooled by that. But it's an I-35, meaning that the tip, the head of the line is going to sink at intermediate depth, or I say 1 inch per second. Then you have the rest of the belly of the line is going to sink at 3 inches per second, and then your running line sinking at 5. And why that's important is it because it gives you a very linear sink rate. So instead of your whole line sinking straight down like this, your line then sinks like this. And that's important because your fly is going to be out in hopefully 17 feet of water, but the line at your feet's in about 6 inches of water. And if that line at your feet is sinking at, I think I misspoke here. Sorry, the tip sinks at 5, running at 3, sorry, belly at 3, running line at 1. So let me rephrase that. So that way your tip sinks faster out there, but the line by your feet won't sink so fast. It'll get tangled up in the rocks, the barnacles, and the mussels, and get tangled up where you have to cut your fly line. So I've had that happen to people when I've been out there where their line gets tangled around there. And if you guys used to jetty fish back in the day, most these lines didn't exist. They didn't have density compensated fly lines. They had lines that all sank at 5 or 7 inches per second. And then they would get ruined, and people go, I just lost an $80 line, a $100 line. I don't want to do this anymore. And so then they make a kind of jerry rig a line. They put a bunch of T14 at the end of shooting running line, and they try to fire that out there. But guess what? That doesn't cast very well, and it's not very fun. And I found if things aren't very fun or aren't very comfortable, no one wants to do them. So then you go, I don't want to do this either. So, but I've had the same line for as long as I've had the reel, so 5 years. I'm going to get a new one this season, not because I have to have one, but because I should get one at this point, because it's just a matter of time before it's been worn down. Really shouldn't be using lines that long anyways, especially in such a harsh environment. So I'll get a new line, and then my old line will become my backup. So if something happens to the new one, at least I'll have one to save the rest of the day for me. But a good line will last you indefinitely, and I like the Scientific Angler one. The next line you can get is the Orvis depth charge. It's the exact same line because Orvis owns Scientific Angler. They just put one in the Scientific Angler box and they'll put one in the Orvis box. They're identical. So if you love Orvis and you want to go to the Orvis store up in Portland, you can get that one. The Rio outbound short works great. I just don't use that one. If you're a Rio guy, everyone has their brand. It's kind of like cigarettes. Everyone has their brand and they kind of stick with them. So Rio, if you're a Rio person, go with the outbound short. I think Cortland has a line that could work. I don't think Airflow has a line that does it like that. But Scientifically Rio, you should be able to find them just about anywhere. And then leaders. So I didn't bring them, and it's one of those things that I always forget to bring to one of these because it's a little product, but I have this product called an Invisa Swivel. So the way I build my leaders is I do a short 2-foot butt section of 20 or 25-pound fluorocarbon. Then I use an Invisa Swivel, which is a fully fluorocarbon swivel. It's a swivel entirely made out of fluorocarbon. And then I do a tippet section of anywhere between 4 to 7 feet of either 10 or 12-pound fluorocarbon. I like 12 because the rocks and everything will fray up that line. It just means it can last a little bit longer before you have to replace it. So that's just something to keep in mind with it. But the Invisa Swivel is really cool. With it being fully fluorocarbon, it doesn't sink and doesn't float. And the other thing that's really nice, it doesn't corrode, so it never binds up, it never rusts, it never breaks down. So as long as you get the right size and it doesn't break on you, you can kind of use it indefinitely. There are, so you can get some that break at 20 pounds, 25, 30, 35, 50. So the question was, is there a rating on them? Is there a like a break strength? And so yeah, I think they start off at maybe 15 pounds, 20 pounds, something like that, break strength, and then they go up from there. And they come in different colors. So I buy clear, but they also come in chartreuse, which some people like as kind of like a hot spot on their leader to kind of pull fish in, and then they see your fly and then go from there. And they also have it in red. And red's important because it goes invisible basically at night. And so you can put red on there and then you won't even know it's there. But I just buy clear. I buy them online. They come in packs of 5. They're kind of expensive. I think it's like $1.25 a swivel. So a 5-pack comes out to like $6.25, I think is what the math works out to be. But that but I think they're worth it. They're totally worth it. They're great for any streamer fishing you do. They're great for the saltwater for the anti-corrosion properties. But I was kind of turned on to buy them a few years ago, and I haven't looked back since. They're totally worth the money, in my opinion. So we'll talk about flies. So this is from a buddy of mine took that picture. There's some anchovies. That's for me when I gut the last batch of fish I took home. Their bellies were full of anchovies. It made for a fun experience when you're cleaning fish to find bonus fish. So those are going to be about 2 inches long. Sorry, the question was, how long are they? They're about 2 inches. That's about an anchovy size that they're going to eat. Herring are going to be closer to that 3 to 4 inch size. I have more. We'll talk about some flies in here, but surf smelt, northern anchovies, Pacific herring, Pacific sardines, sand lances, shrimp. You can do everything but shrimp and just put it in one category called shiny thin fish. So that's why clousers work so well because they're shiny and thin. I have another fly up here called a jetty worm that's going to be more of that shrimp kind of crabby looking fly. It works extremely well. It's slowly become my go-to fly out there over the clouser. But this kind of gives you an idea of what they're eating. Um, so there's some clousers. You can see I have some out of bucktail and I have some synthetic ones. I really prefer the synthetic ones over the bucktail ones. Not because I hate bucktail. Bucktail's great, but bucktails are really expensive. I don't know if you guys seen the price of bucktail recently, but a decent bucktail is going to cost you $15 now. They're very expensive. I don't know what the deer market has done, but they've bucktails have gone up. So synthetics are really great because they're also really durable. These fish have evolved to eat things with shells, and so their crusher pads are very abrasive. And so I would say a bucktail clouser will last you between 3 to 5 fish before it doesn't have any more bucktail on it. They get shredded, and not only do the fish shred them, the rocks shred them. So I really don't. I have bucktail because sometimes they have to have a bucktail fly, but I way prefer synthetic. So I use SF blend, which is Steve Farrar blend. It's a polypropylene yarn with flash blended into it, and I add a little bit of lateral scale in there. But if you don't like that material, like you see up here with the green, the blue, and the purple one, you can do things like EP fiber, Congo hair, yak hair, DNA, whatever kind of synthetic or long natural material, robust natural material you like. And then you can do fox or bucktail. Bucktail is probably the most brittle out of there, and then it gets more robust from there. But that kind of gives you an idea. Simple fly. Most people here is probably tied a clouser if you tie flies or seen a clouser. They're everywhere. Ubiquitous fly. Bob Clouser did a great job with them. The next one is these jetty worms. So this was developed by Spawn Fly Fishing. This is my variation of that fly. It's not exactly how they tie it. They use specifically a tungsten slotted football shaped bead. Um, they developed it and they designed it, and it's a really great bead, but it's like $1.50 a bead now. And I don't want to spend $1.50 on a fly that's going to get shredded by fish in the rocks, and I'm probably going to lose it. So I've switched to using brass eyes. You can also buy tungsten eyes if you want, but I buy brass eyes and I put some lead wire on there. And it seems to get down deep enough. I seem to catch plenty of fish, so I'm not worried about it. But it uses that disco mop chenille that Hairline sells. It's a mottled color, so it has the black speckled in there. But the most successful color is this one right here, the peach color. And it's basically just, if you look it up, you'll see how they tie it. I tie mine slightly differently, but you'll get there with their video that they have online. But the shrimp one is probably my most successful, followed very closely by that white one. That white one does really, really great when they're really targeting bait fish. If they're on bait fish, that white one is a really great one to go. Otherwise, the searching pattern is going to be that peach color. And when I say they're on bait fish, you'll see them on bait fish. They will crash bait fish on the surface just like you're down in South Florida. You'll be out there, it'll be glass calm, it'll be 10:30 at night. Looks like you can take your float tube out there. Don't. But it looks like you could, and you'll see kind of the water get nervous, and then you'll start seeing little anchovies jumping, and then you'll see rockfish jumping through them. It's really awesome to see. And when they're on bait fish, when they corral them up, if you get your fly anywhere near there, it will they eat the fly like it owes them money. They eat that fly so hard. So that white one is kind of there for those kind of moments. But you can use others. Black works well. Red's a good color. You can do like a white and blue. You can do an all blue one. You can kind of mix and match. It's fly time. You guys can do whatever you want. The only place you can buy these right now is you can go to Two Rivers Fly Shop and buy some that I've tied for Mitch there, or you can go up to Washington, to Illiwaku, Washington, and buy them from Spawn Fly Fishing. So those are the two options you have. Or you time yourself. That's option number 3. So the next one is the finesse game changer, and this is not a fly for the faint of heart. It is a multi-articulated fly. Mine are, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 articulation points on that fly. So it's like tying 6 flies in one. But these game changers, you tie them with this finesse game changer body chenille, and then you trim them to a bait fish shape. I add schlappen for the tail, or you can add synthetic tails or marabou tails, whatever you want to do with that. But you tie these out there. I tie them small, like that 2.5 inch, that anchovy size, and then bigger, that 4.5 inch, more of that herring size, big herring kind of sized. And again, when they're on bait fish, You strip that fly, it's usually a hard strip pause, hard strip pause. When you go to strip again, it feels like you're pulling the ocean inside out because they eat it hard, and it's usually not the runt of the litter is going to be eating something like that. It's going to be the biggest fish of the school wants a fly like that. And so those are back-breaking takes. I really, really recommend having like two in your box. They're expensive to buy. I think I put prices up there. Yeah. So if you buy them commercially, you're right around that $15 range. But if you get them custom tied, they're going to be closer to like $25. Not because they're terribly hard to tie. They are. They're not easy. It's not like tying a woolly bugger or a San Juan worm, but they're laborious and they use a lot of points. So I do these because they're the most cost-effective ones for me to tie. But you can get feather changers, Senyo laser dub changers. If anyone has Blaine Chocolate's book, I think he has like 45 different types of changers in there. So there's a lots of different ones you can go with, but these are very effective. And I use Arex hooks as the main hook, and I don't put any trailer hook. A lot of them you'll see they'll put a hook at the tail or a hook midway up there. These fish eat fish head first. So you don't need to mess with more hooks kind of flying around in there. You just need to have a hook in there. And so yeah, the question was, is it chenille? Yeah, that it's called Finesse Game Changer chenille, and it comes in different sizes. I just buy it, I think, in the standard size, and then I trim it. You can buy it in extra large, you can buy it in small, you can buy them in different ones. But the trimming's where the time comes in. I'll probably take me 30, 40 minutes to tie one of these while I'm watching a show on my desk kind of thing, and then another 30 minutes of trimming because you can trim these all day long. You can just keep going. They're really hard on scissors too. Synthetics are known for being really hard on your scissors. So use either a cheaper pair of scissors or buy a pair of scissors that's for synthetic. So that's what I've done. I bought a synthetic material scissor. Use that. Double serration helps a lot too, but it can really dull your scissors down really quickly. Synthetic specifically, and this is a lot of cutting synthetic. So, but it's totally worth having. I totally recommend it. Again, you don't need 45 in a box. Don't need to be like a crazy person like me. You saw some of my boxes at the earlier slides. We'll kind of go up here. You don't need that many flies in your box. You don't need to be crazy like I do. I just tie a lot of flies, and so that's how I kind of fill things out with. So you can see up there I have 10 game changers. So I have a lot. So, and the cool part is with them being white is you can then take them with a marker and make them different colors. You can make them anchovy color. You can make them herring color. You can add orange dots on them for a hot spot. You can add, the black kind of shad cheeks on them. So, right, for example, if you fished at a Reedsport, they got shad that run through the Umpqua. Those ones, you're probably going to want something that looks like a shad. So it just kind of gives you an idea of what you can do with them. So these are just some must-have materials for those who tie flies. I tie flies. I don't buy flies, so I would always want to know what materials to have. So this kind of gives you an idea. I can see a lot of phones coming up for pictures. Take your pictures. Feel free. But it kind of gives you an idea where to start with. Some of you guys might already have a lot of these materials. The hooks, maybe not so much. Trout typically don't need stainless steel plated hooks. But I kind of go with the nicer stuff nowadays. You can get away with cheaper stuff for sure, but again, you're out there. You're not doing it a lot. Most people don't fish the jetty more than once or twice a year, give or take. Most people don't fish more than 5 or 6 times a year. So if you're going to go out there, make it worth your time. Make sure you go out there with good, sharp equipment. These fish have hard mouths. Again, they eat things with shells and pinchers and spikes. So you want to make sure your hook can penetrate that. So see one more phone. I'll let the last phone kind of go up there, and then we'll go into the next one. So gear for fishing. So this is a buddy of mine. He caught a lingcod out there, sent me the picture, and said I could use it. So that was on a clouser, just a black and red clouser. You can see the current size limit. I think, again, don't quote me on this. I'm not the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I think it's 22 inches. 22. I got a second 22. Okay, so we'll take that as what it is currently. But they change it, so it could change next year. They could make it 25. They could make it 20. There's other things. We'll talk about some of that stuff here coming up here. Say again? Minimum. So it has to be. So bring a tape measure and bring something to put in their mouth, not your hands. You can. You just will be done fishing for the day. Because they have hooked teeth. And so if you get your hand in there, it's going to be, you got to put it in deeper to get it back out. So it is not fun. So I have a pair of those like fish grippers. I just bought a cheap pair of fish grippers. So that way I don't get in there. And then I have a pair of pliers as well. We'll talk about some of that. So perfect. This is some of the safety stuff out there. So you want boots or closed-toed shoes. Don't bring your Crocs. Don't bring your flip-flops. Don't bring your Birkenstocks. Bring real shoes. I wear Corker's wading shoes. So they're the kind of the lightweight wading shoes. think they're $100. And then the cool part about them is they're corkers, so I can just take the soles off and put studs on. I could put felt on. I could put just rubber. It's really nice compared to like my Blundstones. These are just rubber. That's all I got with them. So kind of, I really, really like them. So I use those. I used to wear wading boots. I wouldn't bring anything out there with boa. Not because it's not good. It's just you don't want salt water in your stainless steel boa system and having that go south on you when you go fish the Deschutes next, for example. So just bring real laces and kind of a real shoe. I like studs out there. Some guys don't like them. I really like them. The only downside is when you get in those really smooth rocks, there's nothing for those studs to bite into. So it's like being on roller skates. So just know that when you're walking out there, don't run out there. Take your time with kind of how you're maneuvering. But when you get down to the water, most of that salt water has eroded and eaten into the rock, so you get a really good grip. They're really good for clearing rocks too. So if you have a rock that's covered in kelp, you can use those studs to help scrape off that kelp or any of that organic material in there that's real slippery. So like that. I wear pants, don't wear shorts. You don't want your exposed legs out there to get rubbed on the rocks and cut open. Layers, it's out there. Some of the things I put up here with the asterisks that I kind of say are mandatory. The whistle, headlamp, PFD, and eye protection, and shoes. So the reason why is you need a whistle for a sounding device. You want to make sure that a boat going by can hear you if you fall into the water. You just yelling is not going to be heard over a diesel engine on a shrimp boat. Headlamp, you have to have a headlamp. You don't want to be using your phone when you're out there trying to catch a fish. You want to have a headlamp. So I went and finally invested in a really nice one. I think they're Black Canyon headlamps. It's rechargeable. It's like I have the sun strapped to my head. It's really nice. Flashlight's optional, just in case your headlamp goes down. You need to be able to get back to your car. PFD. So uh, I've never needed it, but I'm glad I have it, and so do the people who care about me. So wear a PFD. The nice part about it, it's really insulating. So if it's cold, keeps you nice and warm. So, and I have one of those kind of fishing life jackets. So it has lots of pockets and things. I can put a lot of stuff in there. I put a glow stick in one and I crack it so that way if I do go in, at least I'm illuminated. I got my whistle. I have my cutters. I have a couple flies, a spool tippet in there. I'm all ready to go. Eye protection. So everyone probably wears sunglasses when they fly fish. Does anyone here not wear polarized sunglasses when they fish? Perfect. That's what I want to see. But how many wear sunglasses at night on the jetty? Also, no one. Perfect. But everyone will take them off. And that's what happens. You get out there, you start your day, you're wearing your sunglasses, gets dark, you take them off, and now you don't have any eye protection. Then the wind comes out, you miss a cast, and you have a 2-watt zinc plated hook coming right at your face with nothing in the way. So if you don't wear prescriptions like I do, bring a pair of your shop safety glasses. You're going to look like a dork out there, but it's nice to have both your eyes and still be around. So highly recommend bringing some kind of eye protection for those who don't wear prescriptions. Also keep your prescriptions on you. I've done that before where I've gone out there with my sunglasses, which are prescription, take them off and go, all right, let's put where are they? And I don't have them. So, and then a first aid kit. Nothing crazy. You don't need to be out pulling, kind of more of a trauma thing. So if you cut yourself deep enough, that salt water lets that blood kind of flow. It's nice to have something to kind of wrap up and pack in there. So I put this all in a waterproof backpack. So I have a nice little roll top waterproof backpack that I keep everything in. A stripping basket is mandatory. The reason why is I don't want all my fly line that I spent so much hard-earned money on to end up in the rocks and ruined and stepped on by my studs and stepped on between my rocks and my boots. So I put in a stripping basket. You can buy them cheap on Amazon. You can buy them. You can pay a lot for them. My personal favorite one is the Arex stripping baskets. They're really low profile. They're really nice and neat, and they sit on your hip perfectly. Excuse me. But yeah, they are the ones to definitely use. You have to have some kind of stripping basket to put your line in. Saltwater pliers, Dr. Slicks are the best on the market for the price. They're green and yellow like the Dr. Slick kind of colors, and I keep a pair on my hip. And they are great for getting flies out of fish with teeth. They're great because they have cutters on them. They're just a really good, worthwhile investment. Lifetime warranty. I had one where the holder broke off of the clip on mine last time I went smallmouth fishing. So I just sent them back. They sent me a brand new pair with the updated clip and sheath for them. So totally worth it. Nippers are good. You got to have those. A comb. If you use anything synthetic, you got to have a comb. And then swivels, like I mentioned, the Swivel. Mention flashlight again. And the other thing is a lantern or a floodlight. So has anyone ever gone out to the jetty and used a lantern or a floodlight out there? Anyone? One. We got one in the back. Perfect. I've done it too. I've taken out my big shop light. I have a big Milwaukee kind of mobile floodlight and put it down on the water. and it definitely brings fish in closer. I would argue it doesn't bring any more fish in. I haven't been like, I'm only catching 2 fish and then I catch 30 kind of thing. But it does mean you don't have to cast as far. Instead of me casting from me to the back of the room, for a good long cast, I might be able to cast from me to you. I've seen actually what it does is it brings in plankton, which brings in those anchovies or herring, then it brings in the rockfish. I've seen rockfish shoot through the light, eating things, eating flashes in the light. So it's really fun to do that. But then you got to lug around a light or a lantern. And so if you want to lug around more stuff when you're out there, be my guest. But I just, I've tried it, I've done it, so I can say I have. I just don't think it's worth it in the long run. Yeah. So, so I would use the exact, if you're using a line from a boat, I'd use the exact same line. I wouldn't change anything. I just think it's the best all around line. It does, salt water is much more dense than fresh water. It has salt in it. So the sink rates aren't as high as you think. So when you think of yourself, when you think it's a, 5, 3, 1, it's probably closer to a 4, 4.5, 2, 2.5, half inch per second. More or less. If I want to change my depth, I change my fly. That's really what I'm going for. Or my countdown time. So a type 5 means I'm thinking of 5 inches per second in a perfect world. So that means after 10 seconds, I'm down 50 inches. So a little over 4 feet without using my heavy fly. So I'm probably closer down to 8 feet in 10 seconds. Now, if I put a game changer on, I'm probably closer to that 4 feet. So it kind of gives you an idea. I'd use my fly to be uh, my depth gauge and my countdown. Just count down longer if you wanted to sink deeper. Because your retrieve is going to vary. So I'll retrieve it either long, slow pulls so I can feel the fly go up and over the rock and down. The big things that the jetty has taught me that I use in other fishing is one, I fish a crayfish way better for smallmouth because I know what the bottom feels like. I know what it feels like, and then I know what it feels like when it's being sucked into a fish. So that's really helpful. That's a big thing. Also, casting at night is great because you can't see your cast. You have to feel your cast. So Beth can probably speak to that, and so can the other casters here. Feeling your cast is really important than just seeing it. So even though I haven't done any formal training on my casting, it has greatly improved it just by be able to know, oh, I need to let my cast roll out longer. Oh, I let it roll out too long. It's one of those kind of things. So it's really helpful for those kind of things. But yeah, great question on the line for the boats. So we'll talk about harvest recommendations. So this is probably one of my bigger fish I caught there, probably like a 3-ish pound rockfish. Again, I thought it was going to break my 8 weight. They're huge, probably 18 inches, something like that. But it's you can harvest fish. I think the current limit right now is 5 rockfish, at least for 2024. Again, that changes every year. You can also keep cabezon. There's a season for those. I think it starts early July, ends in October. Cabezon, if anyone knows what a cabezon is, it looks like a big sculpin. It's not a sculpin. They're slightly different, but they eat crabs, so they taste like crab. So it's just like getting big fillets of crab meat. They're incredible, but there's a kind of a lock season on those. But for rockfish, you keep 5, and if you have multiple people with fishing license, you can take 10. So every once in a while, I'll take them if I feel like I want to clean fish at 1 o'clock in the morning, which is rare. But if you're camping out there or staying out there, you got like an Airbnb kind of thing, you can put them on ice and do it in the morning. I just like to get it all done all at once kind of thing. But it's definitely worth keeping them. They're delicious fish tacos. They're great in pasta. They're they're really a great eating fish. So don't feel bad taking them. I would feel bad if you took every fish that you caught kind of thing. If you took the 3-inch fish and the 12, 14, 16-inch fish, it's probably not the way to do it. If you look at other Facebook groups or other groups that talk about fishing on the jetty, those guys who gear fish want fish so badly. You'll see a stringer and it's 5, 6-inch fish. And I just don't think it's worth it. But we're fly guys. We feel differently about it. But just keep that in mind. You don't want to just overtake. The big benefit is if anyone crabs here, or hopefully some of you guys do, I crab. The heads are great crab bait, and you get them as a bonus. So totally worth having. So part of the species list. So these are what you can catch out there. So it's 1 or 2 fish that are available, but the main thing are going to be the black rockfish, like you can see right there. Deacons are almost identical to black rockfish. For a long time, they didn't exist. They just thought they were the same species, but deacons are kind of a subspecies of black rockfish. They have lingcod, sculpin, kelp greenling, copper rockfish, Irish lords, Cabezon, which I didn't put up there, but I mentioned earlier. Irish Lords are big giant sculpin, and they're bright red. I mean, they're redder than the chairs in here. They're a wild fish. You can also get Chinook, coho, sea run cutthroat, steelhead. A buddy of mine, Cooper, he was out there. He was fishing. He had just a blue and white clouser on. Locks into a fish, and it just starts rip and drag. And by the time he lands it, he got a fin clipped, dime bright Chinook. So you never know what you're going to catch out there. He was kind of popular for about 3 years ago when it kind of came in, and people were like, "You caught it? Where? What?" Like people were shocked. So you never know what you're going to catch. So that gives you kind of a fun idea to, when you're going out there. So here's some more pictures for courtesy of my friend Mike. When I talk about crabs like him, you can see one of his fish was on a stringer and it did not make it. The crabs kind of beat him to it, but that kind of gives you an idea. They're just some good pictures. He's a really good photographer, so I like putting some of his pictures in there. But this is the thing. Let's see if it loads. The internet here isn't super fast, but this is the video that I did uh, earlier this year when I was out there. Well, I don't know if we have any audio. Probably not. But we're fishing out here. The one thing you want to pay attention to is the middle finger on my fly line. You see where my line is wrapped around my middle finger right there. What you don't hear there was a guy asking, "Have you caught any?" I said, "Nothing yet." And as soon as I said "yet," that's when I hooked up. So kind of gives you an idea of what's out there. Fortunately, stripping your line like that is going to be in the way. But you can see I don't give him an inch. He pulled pretty hard, and that's probably a 1 pound fish right there. So kind of gives you an idea of what's out there. So there you go. So that was right at dusk. Let's see if it moves along. So that kind of gives you an idea of the jetty. I'm getting a question from the back actually. So one of the things out there is sea lions. That's another thing you got to keep in mind. Seals and sea lions. They love fish, and so they love fish in distress. So I was out there and I hooked a fish, and I think I saw a sea lion from me to Beth. And guess what? When they're not down from a platform next to where the undersea gardens is, they are humongous up close. They're like horses that swim. They're wild. So when you get something like that, hold the fish in as quickly as you can. Do not hesitate on that. Usually they leave you alone because they see you're not a fish, you're a person, and you're there. But just keep that in mind. Um, no, not really. Haven't really had issues with that at all. The fish are usually too big for them. They're probably, if you see those, that's a good sign. That means they're eating the bait fish, which means the fish are eating them from the bottom up. So good, but good question. Any other questions while I'm up here? Yeah. Yeah, sure. So asking how well do I do during the day? Probably 25% of the time I do well during the day. It's very seldom. Daytime is not a common. The problem is the fish are nocturnal. So some days you'll have a great day. Usually when it's more overcast is when you'll have a better day success. But bluebird skies, remember they have big eyes, and unfortunately fish don't have sunglasses. So they if it's really bright, they kind of hunker down to the rocks and kind of hang out there. Plus they're easier for seals to eat. They're easier for other things to eat. So they like to kind of hunker down. Lingcod are much more active during the day. So when you act about daytime fishing, lingcod are going to you're going to catch lingcod during the day. I have never heard of anyone. I have never caught any lingcod at nighttime. They just don't come out like the rockfish do. And I think they know that. I think the rockfish know lingcod aren't nocturnal. And so they come out at night and the lingcod come out during the day. So, a good question. You can, but I've also fished up, say, towards the ocean side of all those fingers. So either or. So it doesn't. It honestly, it's wherever the fish are hiding, kind of thing. You just kind of have to hunt around and look for them. I've caught them feet from the vault toilet. I've caught them right where the gate to the jetty is at. It does say it closes. I've never seen it closed. I think it's rusted in place. No one ever closes it. The one day I would not go out to the jetty is 4th of July or whenever they're doing fireworks. I have done that thinking, I'll be nice. I can see a fireworks show and fish. You are the fireworks show. Those people out there with their RVs launch fireworks. It feels like you're in Fallujah. It is crazy. They feel like they're launching them at you. And so do not recommend that. So 4th of July weekend and whenever they do the fireworks shows there, I would not recommend. I would avoid at all costs. But yeah, I usually turn it off unless I hook a fish. So I'm usually just in. Oh yeah, why burn up the battery? There's no need to burn up the battery if I don't need to. So I just stand and I'm not moving. I'm just standing on a rock. There's nothing to look at. It's just water out there. I know what water looks like. So I want to save my battery. The last thing I want is to be out there and be smacking my headlamp open, it turns on. But yeah, mostly the only time I turn it on is when I hook a fish, so I can unhook him, and so the GoPro can see it, and so I can take a picture of him. But otherwise, if I don't have a GoPro on and I'm not filming, or if I don't want to take a picture of it, probably don't even turn it on. I can probably just do it by feel. So yeah, I just want to save my batteries out there. When I had a headlamp that took batteries, I kept a spare in my bag just in case, kind of thing. So, question in the back. So the question is, what color of clousers do I use? Chartreuse and white is my go-to, followed very closely by blue and white, and then tan and white, and then so on and so forth. But that's just what I have confidence in. Everyone has different feelings on that. Some guys like purple and white, some like yellow and red, some like browns and blacks. Black and white's really good, especially if there's a lot of rockfish, because they'll eat little rockfish, will eat each other. So sometimes that's nice. But chartreuse and white, if I had to have one, that's the one I would go with. Yep. So the question was about weight of flies and how do I choose what weight. I just use large dumbbell brass eyes on all my flies. I don't change small, medium, large, extra large, anything like that. And I just choose my depth based on countdown. So start of the day, I count it down all the way down to the bottom. And then as the night progresses, and hopefully as I keep fishing, I'll catch fish as the fly is dropping. So let's say I give it a 30-second count to start the day, crawl the fly back, hook a fish, hook a fish. Then hopefully I cast as I'm waiting for that 30-second count. All of a sudden I lock up with a fish at 20, which then tells me I stop at 20 and then start my retrieve. Sometimes it's a quick retrieve, sometimes it's a slow drag. It just depends. It's like all fishing. Like if you go somewhere for trout, you might have a day where you catch a lot of fish, ripping flies back. Sometimes they want it stationary underneath an indicator. It changes every time you go, but that's part of the fun to figure it out. But typically what I like is a very slow pull. So, any other question? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so the clouser is going to flip upside down. Oh, sorry. Is the fly jigged at all? So, because it's being pulled along the rock. So, clousers are going to be flipped underneath because of the heavy brass eyes, and then the jetty worms are actually tied on a jig hook. So they're actually tied to ride hook point up. Right, and they're not heavy enough to get down to the bottom. I put a little bit of lead wire on the bend of the hook to kind of let it, keel right. So when I kill it, it doesn't twist or spin. It can just kind of die, and that's when they eat it. So I found that, yeah, for what you're asking, I lose more flies from being beat up from fish in the rocks than I do from just hooking into something and breaking off. The first few times you go, you'll probably break off half or more of your flies that you bring. It's just because you don't know where stuff is and how to kind of counteract that as it's going through the current. But as you do more of it, like my friend Cooper, who does it a ton, I don't think he normally doesn't lose any flies. He ties them pretty bulletproof, lots of super glue, lots of epoxy, but he'll use the same fly for the entire night, typically. So kind of gives you an idea. After you do it a while, you get better at it. It's just kind of like nymphing. You stop hooking the rocks and the logs as much once you kind of learn how the river kind of moves your flies and what's too heavy, what's too light, kind of thing. So, any other questions while we're up here? Otherwise, I'm happy to hang around and answer questions on one-to-one basis if you're too shy to say in front of the class. But yeah, excellent. Thank you guys.